Photo Focus Lightroom Hangout.
Yay!
This is Levi Sim, and I am here with my co-host Rob Sylvan. Hello, Rob.
Hey, Levi.
Where you at, Rob?
Where am I? I am in New Hampshire. Beautiful
Excellent.
fall day. Leaves are turning.
I thought maybe you were in Britain because Glenn Lewis was peeking in the window back there.
My favorite photo bomber is joining me once again.
Permanent photo bomb.
Yeah.
And also joining us is the indefatigable Ron Pepper. Pepper, are you back in San Francisco area? Where are you?
Hello, hello. I'm all the way on the West
Coast. Are you
Coast.
back in California, or are you traveling around the world still? Good.
Oh, I'm back in San Francisco, back home now.
All right.
Perfect. Perfect. But you've recently traveled, and we're going to see some of your work today. We're excited about that. And we do this hangout every month, usually towards the end of the month, usually on a weekday.
Yeah.
Because we tried that on a Saturday, and Levi didn't show up. And we've got a couple of sponsors who help make this podcast happen. And the first of those is Adobe, who gives us Photoshop and Lightroom. And I use those in the Creative Cloud photography bundle, which I get together for just a few bucks every month. I get the latest of all the features, and I can put it on any computer I'm working on anywhere there's an internet connection, and I love it. It is really a terrific way to work.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, do you have any favorite things about that plan, Rob?
Well, I mean, it's just hard to beat the price.
Yeah.
$9, $10 a month, and then Lightroom Mobile, which seems to be getting a lot of love and growth there. So.
I love Lightroom Mobile. I use it every day. I think it's an excellent portfolio solution as well.
Yeah.
And Pepper is joining us from well, he happens to be an evangelist for HDR Soft, which is the manufacturer, the developer of Photomatix, which is a wonderful HDR tool. And so we're sure glad to have them as a continuing sponsor on Photo Focus.
Yeah.
And I've been using them for
the
5
HDR
years.
tool. Yeah.
The HDR tool.
That's right.
That's right.
It was a life-changing app back for me in about 2006, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Pepper, when you're not traveling the world on vacation,
still doing photography and just
what do you do in the world aside from travel and vacation and do evangelize HDR Soft? What is like what are you also known for?
Known for, let's see, great smile. No, I'm a panoramic photographer, and I've been doing that professionally since about, depending how you measure it, maybe 2003. And then I also was helping with I always have had kind of a nice software arrangement where I was helping with stitching software, which is for panoramic. And then later on I got involved with HDR Soft, and so it's been kind of this really great dual job. Like I kind of have a part-time job with them where I'm really a contractor, and then I do my own photography as well. And other than that, just trying to make it here in San Francisco and take care of kids and all that kind of thing. So like you just mentioned, I just got back from a trip, and that was mostly vacation. It was I did there was the best I could do with a 2-year-old along, and
right.
being able to bracket was this huge advantage for me because I didn't plan when I was going to take photos, and I didn't research the locations. I did ask a local guy to help me and show me around once, which was great, but the times I had to shoot was really once. So other than that, I just had my camera and a relatively cooperative little guy, and so I was able to kind of do more than I would have if I hadn't really been thinking in a bracketing kind of mindset, I think.
Yeah, totally.
And then I've used Lightroom Mobile to cull down all those. I don't know how many photos it was.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, and Ron, Pepper, you mentioned that. I mean, you're doing all these different things, and I think we're all kind of that way. We're photographers.
I forgot to mention a writer for Photofocus now.
Exactly. Yeah, you're also a contributing author on Photofocus, as are Rob and I. And I mean, Rob's an author with several books under his belt and a traveling teacher. He's got workshops all over the country. Yosemite coming up in November. If you're looking for an excellent way to learn more about landscape photography, I recommend you to Rob's workshops.
We definitely cover HDR there too.
Yes. And I mean, so yeah, we're doing all these things, and that's fun. I'm on tour with the Scott Kelby seminars. You see all these boxes behind me right now, helping to with one of our partners on Photofocus, Perfectly Clear, and I've got their trade show booth in all these boxes behind me right now. So.
You're not just in the closet. This is actually, you just got so much stuff.
Yeah, I'm not in. Those are the doors to let me out. Those are the doors into the closet. Right? Yeah. No, but you know, as photographers, we're diverse, and I think that's cool.
You have to be these days, right?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that keeps us diverse is learning new tools and new ways to finish our photographs.
That's right.
And HDR is a fun one.
Yeah, so we want to talk about shooting for HDR. We want to talk about processing in a couple different ways, different tools that are available. We also want to say that at the end of this Hangout, we always give away some prizes, and we've got a few to give away. So for bearing with us to the very end, we're giving away Adobe. Our sponsor Adobe has donated a 1-year photography plan, the Creative Cloud plan. So that's Photoshop and Lightroom for a year. HDR Soft has donated 2 things. One of the full Photomatix Pro and is it Photomatix Elements? Is that what it's called?
Essentials, not to be confused with Photoshop Elements, right?
Thank you. I knew it was an E word.
It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful.
And so we'll be giving those away, and the way you get entered into those is just by asking us a question. So there's a Q&A option for the Hangout. Just click on that and type in your question or leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you and hear any of your questions related to Lightroom, HDR, Photomatix, any of the above. Anything more than that, we'll try it, I guess. But 3 of the winners from the prizes will be pulled from the people who ask those questions at the very end. So Levi mentioned I'm doing a trip to Yosemite in November 5th through the 8th. With the digitalphotoworkshops.com, which you can see down here is the URL. But if you go there, I'm giving away 1 free seat to someone who actually wants to go and can go during that time period. So if you're interested, if you want to go, it's a lot of fun. We shoot in the morning, we shoot at night, we do light painting, we do HDR, landscape. I mean, it's just a lot of fun. Levi's been on one of our trips with us before. We have a great time. So if you're interested in that, just go to thedigitalphotoworkshops.com and just sign up for our newsletter, and I'm just going to pick a winner from that, and I'll email you. So
yeah, I loved it when I went last year. It was really a fun time. I got to go to the Tetons, but if I could go again to Yosemite, would be the ideal spot, I think.
Yeah, and it's nice that time of year. The crowds are low, the leaves are changing, all nice and golden, and we were there 2 years ago at the same time. It was beautiful.
Awesome. Well, and Mark Morrow has just joined us.
Hey!
Mark, can you hear us? Did I mute you?
I don't see any video from Mark.
We're not going to see video from Mark, but
lovely face.
We should be able to hear him. Mark, I muted you. You're going to have to unmute yourself. Click on the little arrow on your icon in the bottom of the screen, and that should unmute you. And we'd love to introduce you. But while we're waiting for Mark to join in, Ron's going to give us some tips about shooting using the camera for HDR and what we want to do to make that work.
Okay, yeah. This is one of my favorite subjects. Is I get a lot of questions about how much. I guess the best way to show that is by way of screen sharing. So let me put up my Lightroom desktop here. So I've got this dark photo showing right there at the moment because we were over at this kind of a tourist area supposed to be scrolling to a lighter one during a time where the light was not the greatest, and the sun wasn't cooperating because I didn't plan for the trip or anything for that moment or anything. But we're here at this kind of famous spot. It's like the tourist area of Prague, and I love that, and I wanted to get something to kind of show for it. So I used some bracketing, and then I put it together, and I got this result kind of after a really quick processing. And of course, I can continue to refine it if I want to, but I got to show the kind of the two main subjects in that square at the same time with a decent sky when there was really not a decent sky that day. So that's that was the purpose of it. And to accomplish that, though, I took 5 shots. And if you're not familiar with how to bracket, you want to space the shutter speeds so that they change equally. So you set your aperture ISO, and then you can bracket so that it takes very fast. In this case, 5 photos with 2 stops difference. So what I ended up with was.
Okay, so you've got 5 photographs that are 2 stops darker or brighter from the one previous.
Right. So like in Lightroom, we can even see, right? You got a 400th of a second, and then it goes all the way down to 6400, 1600, 125th. And then this last one probably wasn't necessary, but that's one of the things I like to mention is that I was able to quickly set the bracketing on and sort of over capture because I just had a moment. I held that camera up as high as I could, my 6'2" self, and then up on my tiptoes as high as I could just to eliminate as much of the crowd as I could, and that's what I got, you know. And for the situation, I'm really quite happy with it. There's some things I do different, sure, but this is one of those great places to say HDR for fun. I think I turned in that situation into a pretty good shot. People that see it say, "Wow, it's a good one." So when you capture the images, just be sure to change the shutter speed. That's the main rule. And you try to capture in the darkest image. You try to capture the brightest area, and vice versa too. You try to capture the shadows in the brightest image. And when you get some those good source images like that, then the processing's really easy. I can show that here if you guys are interested in doing that, or we can go to demos later. But I wanted to show kind of a good use for it, and especially in this context where we said it's for fun. Here's another one where.
Oh, so you're using stacks there. You're stacking up your pictures all together.
Yes, I tried to organize it enough that I could show other people already, but it is not completely organized yet. So here's another kind of not ideal lighting, but it's kind of a neat scene. So I bracketed it together, and I came up with this result. Some more.
Yeah.
Examples.
Okay.
This is just from a tower shot
before
from
and
views
after
from a
down.
tower. Like this
Those
one.
look great. Those look really, really natural too, Pepper.
Yeah, that's what I try to go for generally, is to keep it natural. Let's see, those the source images look like this, and then just let me know if these aren't coming through too well. But the source images look like this. It's okay, but the sky is not interesting, and so I just took the full brackets. Again, I broke my own rules where I didn't really measure it very well. I just kind of set it knowing that I would get more than what I need, but it happened very quickly. I've got a good camera for that. It's the Olympus EM1, where I've set it so that with one button I can toggle the bracketing on and off.
Right.
But that results in I call it over bracketing. I'm not sure what the right word is for it, but I get more than I need, frankly.
That works. That works.
Yeah.
Over bracketing.
Maybe another quick example would be like this, where it's kind of neat where you get that silhouette, but then why not open it up a little bit and show a little bit of the interior rocks? And this gets out into that where it doesn't look quite fully realistic anymore. I realize that, but I'm doing this for fun.
No, go back to that one. I don't. I don't know what's not realistic about it, but
I'd say I look at these all the time, so I look at it as being it's bordering on sort of having that look that people identify as HDR, and I'm fine with that to a certain extent. It's all kind of style. This one's a little stronger, where you can see the interior of the columns there, where one shot would not. See, I believe I can show that.
That is really cool.
A single shot would be this one.
Right. That looks very rare.
So if anybody's new to HDR, these are this is a really good example to show what we're solving, because here you can kind of see the interior where it's really overblown outside, the other way around is you really can't see either of the extremes very well at all. And then we just combine them into, and I cropped it, but that's the combination there.
Yeah. So a question that came in was, did you manually create the bracket, or was it auto bracket?
Auto bracket.
Yeah.
So I set my camera. I'm up in this tower, so I kind of understand the situation. So I was able to set it to. Let's see here. Can't tell you from memory, to be honest. So the middle one would have been the first one in this, the way this camera shoots, I believe. So it was at 3/20th of a second. So then I know that if I took 5 shots at 2 over and under, then that would cover the range as well as I could. And here's a good insider tip that I've been kind of playing with lately. If you have a camera that can take 5 brackets at 2 apart, and you're hand holding, you're just walking around like I was, then if you set it to a 3/20th of a second for the center exposure, because the bracketing is going to take, it's going to take your center exposure, and then it's going to go 2 under, then 4 under, then 2 over, 4 over. So with 3/20th of a second, that's about as slow of a shutter speed as you can go, because it's going to get too slow to handhold at 1/20.
Oh, yeah, that drops down to a 20th. Yeah.
Now with
that's a good rule of thumb for a medium wide lens like your 12 millimeter. 1/320th of a second. That's cool.
The stabilization is good enough that I'm probably okay at a 20th of a second.
Awesome.
If you're pretty steady, you want to be steady. You want to be steady to handhold the bracketed images anyway, because there's going to be a little bit of movement, right? So if you're steady enough for that, then you're probably steady enough to hold at 1/20th with some stabilization. So that's getting pretty nerdy, but I just want to throw that out there.
So that's useful. Well, here's a little more nerdiness then, Pepper. And your camera is set up. I hate the way your camera is set up. Look at this. It's got the middle picture and then the dark up to light. And so how do you usually do? I don't like that setup, because when I'm looking at it in the grid view, it's not really apparent which ones are the bracket. So yes, I always set mine. I set my camera up so that it goes dark to light, first to last. Is that?
Yes,
what do you prefer to do?
That is nerdy, and I struggle with the same thing. So it depends, because the way the Lightroom shows it, it's not a bad idea to see that kind of central one, because usually it's easier to tell what you're looking at than one of the extremes. So
sure.
It's kind of, I guess I like it for this situation. However, when I do panoramic photography, that's always bracketed, and now not only are you looking at bracketed images, but overlapping images. So for my own sanity, I set it the way you're saying, Levi, as I just do them right there in order, and it's much easier to line up and grid look at in Bridge, so that I can really see what I'm doing. So it's one of those many things where the answer is it depends what you prefer.
And let me show you what I mean. So I think you can see my screen. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. And so here are, whoa, too fast. My Wacom is going a little crazy there. Here's what I mean. Looking down at in my film strip down here, you see this one is dark and this one is light, and the whole thing in between here is the bracket, and that's the whole set.
Yeah.
And I like it because it shows up as obviously a bracketed scene. Even this one that wasn't supposed to be bracketed shows up nicely as a bracketed scene as I scoot along through there. And so that just makes it easy to see. What other tips do you use to identify where a bracket begins or stops?
Well, I do really like using the stacks, the groups. Is it stacks or groups in Lightroom?
Stacks.
Stacks.
Yeah, I never recall. I just go Command G and it stacks them and unstacks them. But it's there's too many steps for me. Also, on photos like I was just showing you again, where this was not an organized and planned and researched brackets. I took lots of accidental brackets, like you were just showing. I was getting kind of mad at myself.
Right, because you forgot to turn it off.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I had to go through and really cull out all those and group them, and then another thing too is after you combine them, we can show how to do that in a second, but after you combine them and they get re-imported into Lightroom, now I need to move that result to the top of the stack. So that's a separate, and I haven't found the shortcut yet. So if you guys, Lightroom experts, know the shortcut, let me know, because I have to right-click and go into the menus to move it to the top of the stack.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
It adds kind of a lot of the add steps. You know, doing bracketing and HDR. I wouldn't lie to you. It takes extra steps to accomplish the things, and the organization is one of the biggest things. I was just here to show. I was kind of struggling with, should I just show the whole catalog, or should I make a new catalog just to show things now to make it easier? It makes organization makes it really necessary to use something like Lightroom.
One other thing I often do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
No, I was going to say. So Levi, the way you have it set up, that's an in-camera setting that controls the order in which they're taken.
Exactly. And some of them are default that way. Others, you need to go in and change it.
Yeah. So you need to look you look in your camera and see what you can do if you're doing an auto bracket. If you're doing a manual bracket, then you can shoot it however you want.
And manual bracket's easy. Just tick the thumb wheel 3 times. You know,
right.
It's not bad. And every DSLR or mirrorless camera I've used has the option to change it. Everything.
Yeah, you can get really serious about how you have your settings. Like my SLR, Nikon has a chance to choose menu sets. So I go into panoramic mode, and part of what it does is it organizes it in that way instead of having the middle one first. But I kind of encourage people to do it not like I just showed, where it has the middle image first and start with the one extreme and go to the other. And one of them is that a lot of people still think of the middle exposure as the correct exposure, and then you're over and under exposing after that. And I like to challenge people to don't think that way anymore. In the case of bracketing photos, the correct exposure is usually to capture the entire range. So it's more of a set of images that's the correct exposures. And so if you can break away from the right one and then the others, that can help you because you see the whole range. Other times, break that rule where you're maybe not trying to cover the entire dynamic range. You just want to cover more than you would have. And in that case, yeah, then I think that it's okay anyway, but it makes more sense to consider there to be a correct exposure and then over and under. I think Levi's frozen, so should we take a question?
Yeah, sure. Poor Levi. Yeah, so
tips for natural HDR.
I think just to follow what you're saying, I think the idea here, where HDR has evolved, is the idea of thinking about what is the full dynamic range that I want to capture. How do I get all of that data so that I can then process it the way I want based on my vision or how it looks naturally or whatever your parameters are. So I think that's definitely it's a changing in your thinking. That I think is where we're seeing this going.
I've got a good example up that I can show to illustrate that, where this one is just this is kind of meat and potatoes for me. This is just a hotel room where I did plan, and I had a tripod, and I did everything right, and I metered the scene, so I was able to capture all of the darker details and the shadows in this bright image, and also all the way down to the bright details out the window in the dark image.
Yeah.
So if you take your time and you spot meter, and you maybe take some test shots and you capture the extremes plus everything in between like this, then that solves most of the questions and problems that go along with HDR. Like we're being asked here, tips for natural HDR that pops. Cover the entire range, and you won't get the fakeness unless you want to, because a lot of times where some of the grunginess starts coming out is areas that are not properly exposed, and then it kind of tries its best to pull out everything it can, but it starts to look fake. So if you capture the full dynamic range, that's my main tip on that, and that just kind of helps again show how to really get the best out of doing things HDR related.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to natural, I think things that tend to give away to not being natural is the oversaturation. So
Yeah.
not going too heavy on the saturation in the finished result, and also having some contrast, meaning having some dark shadows. I think what we're
Yeah.
so used to in photographs seeing the shadows are shadows, and if you have a photo that there's no shadow, you're seeing detail under the rock, behind the person, then maybe that went too far. But
Yeah, when it looks fake, there's natural reasons that it looks. That's kind of a strange way to say it. There's obvious reasons that it looks fake. Is that it doesn't look. It may not look like a photograph because it's not something that a camera is able to do. So we're not used to seeing that. So
yeah,
like Rob said, when you don't have any real shadows left because you've tone mapped it so well that you see all the details throughout, well, that doesn't really look like a photograph anymore. Where that might change because of all these kinds of things. Maybe that's going to change over the years.
yeah, it
But
will.
I read a tip a long time ago. I wish I could say who it was to give the credit, but they said bringing back the black in the image. And these days in Lightroom, that means bringing down the black slider just a tad or bringing up the contrast slider can be a huge difference, and suddenly it looks way better. And I do think that tone mapped images do need to be post-process. I don't try to typically get my final result from Photomatix. I know I'm going to do a little bit of post-processing just like any image.
Yeah. So one more question that came in. So I think we can maybe look at some more tips when we're actually doing some processing, which we're going to get to here shortly.
Yeah.
There was a question about that was there and then it went away, I think.
Yeah, that's weird.
But it was one about if your camera doesn't have auto bracketing, how do you do it?
Oh, but by the way, not to be argumentative, but I think all the DX bodies do have it, but it's hiding inside the info menu, not on the outside of the camera in a button.
Maybe. And many of them only have a three-shot auto bracket too,
Right.
and maybe and that may be fine from a lot of your shooting. But if you need to do more than 3 exposures, then you need to do something beyond auto exposure. So.
And let me give a tip for that person. I think he's talking about like DX size, like that'd probably be a Nikon, and this is
Right.
not one of them. But I have had Nikons over the years, and they have programmable buttons down here alongside the lens. It's right next to the aperture preview, the depth of field preview button. There's typically a programmable button. I know my light in here is horrible, but it's down here. And so you can hold that down with one finger and use the dials to set the bracketing on and off, and that's the quick shortcut. And that's in the case there's not a dedicated bracket button already there. You can program it, and that's what I did. Like my D300 is like that, and it's very quick and easy to set once you do that.
Yeah.
Check the manual.
Yeah, but if you don't have auto bracket, or you don't want to use auto bracket, or you need to do more than what your camera auto brackets, just put it in manual and meter the one end of the exposure or the other, so you know what your range is, and start at one point, and just, if you want to do it one stop, 3 clicks, you'll feel it, usually on all cameras, 3 clicks will take you one stop, and just go 3 clicks, take a picture, 3 clicks, take a picture, 3 clicks, take a picture, and however many you want. You can take 21 shots that way. That's
like the only kind of downside to that is you pretty much need you need a tripod in that case. Where with auto bracketing,
Yes.
Yeah.
you just with auto bracketing, as long as the shutter speed is okay for hand holding, and you're pretty stable, then the alignment in the software now is so good that it'll take care of that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. And I mean, I'm so used to. I'm one of those people that carries a tripod everywhere. I have the big ones that I don't mind carrying, but I have a little platypod that I even used last night shooting the moon. Just little thing just sat on my deck. I have a gorilla pod, with the movable legs. So I always feel like I have to have some kind of stabilization around. So I like having that. But you as you demonstrated, you can definitely do it handheld too. Auto bracket also speeds up the time between exposures, which is important if there's anything in your shot that's moving. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, a little bit about ghosting. If people are moving through, or leaves are blowing, or clouds are moving, or water, or whatever those things might be, having the auto bracket helps, but you can definitely do it without it. So another good question.
And yeah, I was going to say there's two more, and then maybe we should dive into.
Yeah, all right. Which one were you going to go with first there?
Well, so there's the let's see. Sandeep asks, do you, instead of changing the f-stop for HDR, is it okay to change the exposure compensation? And I would say, don't change the f-stop ever for HDR.
Yeah.
That'll change. That will change your exposure, but it will also change your keep it to shutter speed. Changing the aperture will also change the depth of field in your picture, and that might just ruin things. So stick to shutter speed for your changes. And if you're in aperture mode, then using exposure compensation is using shutter speed. So go to aperture mode and then use the exposure compensation button to change your shutter speed, and that works just great. And then the other one is about mirror lockup.
Meh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think mirror lockup, there's probably a small set of scenarios where it might make the difference. I don't think HDR probably falls into them necessarily.
I mean, if it's just a long exposure, though, then it.
Well, the problem with mirror lockup, now you've got you got to trip the shutter 2 times depending on your camera, right? And so that potentially is going to slow you down. If your shutter speed's fast, like what Ron was saying for handheld, then it's not doing you any favors anyway. So
that's true.
If you're somewhere like between 1/30th of a second to like a couple of seconds, it might matter, but I don't know.
I mean, I think it follows the same. It's the same as follow regular photography rules if you need it or not. But don't use it for HDR. It's just same thing as hand holding. If you're going to shoot at a speed slower than whatever you're comfortable with, a 15th or something. And you need it in that situation, then go ahead and do that.
Right, and I think personally better than mirror lockup these days is exposure delay mode, which opens the mirror, waits a moment, and then opens the shutter. And I love to use that because, like Ron said, you don't have to do like Rob said, you don't have to do the open the mirror and then open the shutter with button clicks.
Yeah.
Right.
More important than mirror lockup is if you're using mirror lockup, you're probably on a tripod and therefore use a remote.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So should we do some show and tell, and then we'll come back?
We should quickly pause for station identification too.
Yeah, we're hearing Mark. Mark,
hey,
I hear
Mark
you.
Hey guys. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
I hear you. But
we can hear you.
Yeah, I don't have a webcam hooked up. Sorry, guys, not on this station. Listen, I didn't want to. Right. You guys are covering all these questions excellently. I see a couple here. One on ISO bracketing, and that is one that I'll definitely use. It's all manual. There's no bracketing for ISO per se, but it is a useful feature if you're shooting in low light. Or if you need to really bring in some brightness into the foreground or something, if you're shooting a landscape or something. So ISO bracketing is something I find myself doing quite a bit. And to address the luminosity mask question that's up there, actually did a post on this, I think, last year. To me, using a luminosity mask is if I'm blending an HDR with a non-HDR or 2 HDR images in Photoshop together just to try to make water settle down. That's typically when I'll bring a luminosity mask in is to make water settle down when my water is too busy. You know how what HDR can do to water if you're shooting a landscape water scene where something is moving, then it can get tricky. But with the selective deghosting inside of Photomatix, that can kind of help mitigate some of that movement and the issues that are brought in with water. So I just wanted to toss that out real quick before it disappeared.
No, thank you.
What results are you seeing from ISO bracketing? Like I'm curious what the effects on the final image are when you do that.
Well, you have to be careful with it. Definitely, you don't want to really crank it. I don't go above 800 ISO per se, but I have a landscape shot. I don't know if I have one actually in the group that I have to share today, but if it's a sunset scene and to go from the low. To go from the to try to get the deepest of the try to tame the brights of the light if I'm shooting into the sun. When I start moving into trying to bring up foreground, like say the grass that's at my feet, which is really becomes the subject of the scene just about as much as the sun in the distant background. The grass or the leaves or whatever might be in the foreground that I'm trying to enhance, they're really shaded and dark because there's not a lot of light shining on them. So I have to bump my ISO up to bring in detail at those levels that are things that are hiding in the shadows. I don't know any other way to say that. Apologies. But to try to bring up darker elements in the scene, I'll have to use ISO. Without getting into aperture, or you can do it with shutter speed as well, because I'm usually shooting on a tripod, and you can bring a lot of that in with a shutter speed, no doubt, on a tripod. But to go from a 100 to say a 400 or even an 800 ISO maximum for the old camera that I use for this kind of thing is the maximum that I would want to go to bring in the detail. So sometimes just to make things quick, to speed things up quickly because the clouds move, all these things are moving, and to keep the exposure from going too long, I'll speed the shot up by cranking up the ISO a little bit to try to make it to try to get it all without too much movement occurring in the scene. So those are the types of things you have to be concerned about when you're shooting in low light are moving objects such as clouds that begin to become problematic in that type of a setting.
I like that idea. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome. I find it very useful myself for the type of landscape work that I do, or if I'm shooting a twilight scene for real estate. So.
Right. Thank you. And before we dive into some more demonstrations, we just want to remind you that we've got some prizes to give away. We've got the Photographer's Bundle for the Creative Cloud from Adobe. They're one of our sponsors today. That includes Lightroom and Photoshop, and you can get it for just $9.99 a month. And we're giving away a year's subscription to that today. And we're also giving away a license to HDR Soft's Photomatix Pro, which is just some fabulous HDR making software, which Ron is going to show us shortly, and as well as a free pass not a free pass, but a tuition waiver for Rob's. I got Sylvan and Pepper.
There you go.
Sylvan's got a workshop in the Sylvan areas of California coming up in Yosemite, and he's got a scholarship to that for you. And Pepper's given us the HDR Soft license. So
very good.
If you'd like to enter these contests, this raffle, yes.
Yeah.
If you'd like to enter into the raffle, please ask a question or just say hello, but please do it in the Q&A section.
Yeah, and if you want to come to Yosemite with me, head over to thedigitalphotoworkshops.com and just sign up for our newsletter, and I'll pick a name from there. That easy.
Right there, thedigitalphotoworkshops.com.
So
awesome.
We talked about shooting, and some of these questions have been excellent. How about we take a look at Lightroom and just a really simple thing about what Lightroom's built-in photo merged HDR can do, and then maybe Ron or Mark could show us something in Photomatix. How's that sound?
Sure. Sounds
All
good.
Right? Great. Here's just a quick example. So in Lightroom CC, Lightroom 6, we got a nice new feature called Photo Merge to HDR, and there's also a companion of Photo Merge to Pano. And I was in Montana a couple weeks ago and was up at Logan Pass during sunset, and just kind of snapped this scene that I probably could just take this one exposure and crank up the shadows and call it done, I guess. But what kind of like what Pepper was saying was just thinking about how can we use these tools that we have now to think about capturing all of this data that is in front of us that our cameras just can't quite do yet, can almost do, and then putting that all into one file and then processing it. So in this photo merge inside of Lightroom, one of the strongest features of it is that when you use it, the resulting file is still a raw file. So here I shot in RAW, I converted to DNG on import, and if I go to photo merge, we have this HDR option, and notice that there's a keyboard shortcut as well, the Control and H. And if I hold down the Shift key, Shift Control H will do what's called headless mode, where you can select a bracket and just use this keyboard shortcut, and it will just start the processing without opening up the dialog that we're going to see here in a minute. So if I come down here, you can right-click on it, and the Lightroom just takes the exposure. In this case, I took 2. Now you could have more. I think, Ron, you have a great article on Photofocus, isn't it? Didn't recently come out about how many shots should you shoot? So there's a lot of good information on Photofocus as well on HDR. And you get a very simple dialog, much simpler than Photomatix, but it's not quite as powerful, which we're going to see. So in this image, the clouds were moving, but if I click on medium for ghosting and just see if there's an overlay or not, that's going to tell me, how much things moved, and it really wasn't much movement there. I don't see any overlay. So this was on a tripod, and the benefit of using 2 exposures is that there's just less movement between them. All right, so there's not as much to align. So that's one of the benefits. And so if I hit merge, then Lightroom just takes that data and puts it together into one raw file, and then we'll add it in here. One of the things I'll show you too is I don't have my camera set up the way Levi's does, but inside of Lightroom, when you're in this grid view style, you can click on these labels and you can choose exposure bias, and it will show you the plus and minus, of which exposures work. And that can just be another way to kind of clue you in to, which one's which. When Lightroom merges an HDR result, it taps onto the end of that file name of this new DNG file, a -HDR. And as you can see, I already have one in there. So if I just press D and head over to Develop Module, it's just a raw image like it was before, except now it has more information in it. And that's pretty cool, and it's relatively quick. So being that it's still raw, I can change my camera profile. I can see if there's a lens correction profile that still works for this. And I can even do things like have all my white balance. So that's pretty cool, and still working with raw data. And then I can start to do the tone mapping just like I would any other raw image. And that's what I think, when we talked about tips for realistic images, if you're doing all the processing inside of Lightroom, just like you would for a single image, this is really not that much different. I can bring down the highlights to try and bring that in some more, and I can open up the shadows but still leave some shadow. All right, and if you hold down the Shift key inside of Lightroom and just double-click on whites and blacks, it automatically sets those white and black points for you. And so, there's a lot more I can do if since I have the Lightroom CC version, I can come down to the effects panel and maybe try a little dehaze. That might work well in this image. I was lucky when I was there weren't any actual fires in the park, and it was actually pretty smoke-free while I was there as well. Sometimes when you do dehaze, you might need to tweak your white balance afterwards, and so again, trying to keep it realistic. This is a place where I could go crazy, when I want to try and keep it in keeping with what you visualized. If it's too saturated, if it's too over the top, maybe just taking vibrance down a little bit or taking saturation down a little bit. And so I mentioned there's more I can do here, but I just have all of this data that I captured that I have to play with, all inside of a raw file. So that's a really quick, kind of simple look at doing the HDR inside of Lightroom, and gives me the freedom when I'm shooting to think about, hey, I have this tool in my tool belt I can use if I don't think I can get all of the data in one single exposure.
Hey, real quick, a follow-up question for you there.
Yeah.
Craig asks, you didn't select auto tone, correct? When I try and use Lightroom's HDR, the preview always shows up black if the auto tone is not enabled. Have you come across this? Probably, Craig, that means your overall exposure is quite dark. And you could probably shoot a little brighter.
I wonder if that, or maybe you included more exposures than I did. I mean, the two that I had, you could see neither one of them was very dark. I didn't do 7, frames there. That was so that.
And all it does.
Yeah, go ahead.
The auto-tone only just moves the sliders for you. That's all
right.
It does. And so it's just like a preset. You can adjust those afterward.
And there's nothing wrong. You can leave auto-turn turned on, and then once the image appears inside of Lightroom, just double-click on the tone label, and that will reset it back to its default, and then you can change it as you wish. So if that helps you to see it, then by all means use it. I tend not to use it, but it's really, if that works for you, then go for it. Nothing wrong with it.
Sam asks, do you begin with a zeroed tone curve? Now I think this might be different whether you start in HDR effects or in Lightroom. In Lightroom, it kind of resets everything before it does the HDR. Anyway, that's been my experience. Rob, is that been your experience?
Yeah, I tend to, if I'm using Lightroom, then I don't process the individual frames first. I just merge them and then process the final result.
Right, including things like noise reduction, which is another question.
Yeah, because all of that because it's all raw data, then you can just treat it at the end. So there's no reason really to spend any time processing the individual exposures if you're going to do it inside of Lightroom. Just do it all to the final DNG file. Now,
and so Ron, you would also start with the...
Yeah, to combine, I don't know much about the inner workings of the DNG file, because there's all this about it. Apparently it's a 16-bit DNG file, because what I know about is when combining images into a 32-bit file, it's a whole technical thing that, frankly, I don't understand that well, but I do know the answers. Is that when a software is creating a 32-bit file, it's expecting that zeroed tone curve, as he said, a linear file. So that's important that specifically for Photomatix, if you're using tone mapping, then you'll want to have everything 0 for all the exposure and tone curve and all those kinds of things. But the things you can do, and it's optional for you, but it's you can use it's a good idea to use noise reduction. Typically, I do things like my lens correction at that stage because that's an important step that's best done there. But I think that is a little bit different depending on which kind of program you're using. Now, even with Photomatix, if you're using exposure fusion, of which I'm a big fan, and I'll show you a little bit about it. Then you're not using the 32-bit file. You're doing a different kind of process, and I'll tell you about that. But so it's important to know that those two.
We better dive in there, Pepper.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. We'll just use that same image I had there.
Yeah, show us
While Ron's getting set up, Tom has a question about in Lightroom when doing HDR merge, how many stops of exposure? You have plus and minus 10 stops on the exposure slider to play with.
Really, 10?
Yeah, you may not have that much in there. There may not be that much data in there, but the slider will go plus and minus 10 if you move it. If you move it that way.
I wish they'd increase the highlight slider commensurately.
Yeah.
Because that's where I run out of room is running running the highlights. I want to tone them back down.
Then you got to bring exposure down instead.
Yeah. Well, so the hack is use a gradient filter or the paintbrush. Use the adjustment brush.
That's right.
And just duplicate.
Don't try to get too much. Don't try to get too much out of a single file. Pretty soon you just run out of actual information to work with.
Yeah.
That's right.
But let me just do a quick because I know we're having a great time talking, but I guess we should.
You got to show it. Got to show it.
So I know my Lightroom here looks a little bit messy, but I've got, in this case, I have selected 5 images. Is that what I've got here? 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. Make sure, because I've again been moving stuff around a lot. I want to make sure I have this correct. All right. So I might not need this brightest one. It just looks a little bright to me, but again, I was doing it really quickly, so I'm just going to forget about that. So now I have 4, and I don't want to go too detailed at this moment, but the way we invoke the plugin from Lightroom is it's an export plugin, so it's going to export to Photomatix Pro. So that's exactly what I choose. I right-click there, export, Photomatix Pro, Same on Windows. You're going to get a dialog with your kind of pre-processing options, and the important one here is the alignment, because I did handhold that. I just handheld it as high as I could. It's probably one of the least well-aligned ones that I've taken in a long time. So the other options I either did or should have done in Lightroom already, but I didn't want to take that time at this stage. So I should have reduced noise, chromatic aberrations. That's best done in Adobe Camera Raw there. So I'm going to click export and let it do.
You would do that before you export those.
Yeah, I wanted to click export because it's take a minute. We have a second to talk. What I like to do, and one of the big, I like that we're doing a Lightroom Hangout, because I really love using Photomatix and Lightroom combination. It's my favorite way to work with still HDR images, because you kind of get the best of both worlds. Where you get all the, I'm still in my organizational system. I'm still used to all the tools. The raw processor is very powerful. That's one thing that's good to know, is that the raw processor in Photomatix Pro is not as powerful as Adobe Camera Raw. So it's really great to use the strengths and weaknesses of use the strengths of both, right?
Right.
And so I've done, yeah, I would do, especially if I'm doing an interior or something, that's the most important to do. Lens correction, noise reduction is best done at a raw level. Chromatic aberration is best done at a raw level. So I like to do all those things first. But again, not the things like a curve or contrast. We leave those alone, typically. Okay, so here I've got, I'm going to make this bigger for this situation. This is a preview image. If you've used Photomatix before, you're used to this look, I think. And you have so many options. I'm trying to decide what to show. I'm just going to do this by way of presets, which I sort of have a love and hate relationship with, because they're great for idea generating, in my opinion, but not so great for a final result. So in Photomatix, this is just a default result for Details Enhancer. And Details Enhancer is the most famous one, where people are used to seeing kind of crazy results. Like, we can make it crazy with a couple of clicks. So, but that's not what we're going for normally. If you and it's with a little bit of a few options, we can get some nice results there. Just kind of messing around with sliders. So already, I think it looks pretty natural and has some pop to it. I'm kind of pretty generally happy for just doing that so quickly. But don't forget to check other options. Like, I have tone mapping chosen up there in the top left. It's probably a little small on the screen, but it's tone mapping. And the method, I'm going to change that to contrast optimizer. That's a new method since version 5, actually. And it's,
you know what, Ron, would you just expand your Photomatix window?
Yeah.
Overlapping on Lightroom to differentiate. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So the contrast optimizer is also tone mapping, and now really quickly, tone mapping, what you're doing is taking this really wide all these exposures that make up a high contrast scene, and you're reducing the contrast of the scene. I should be showing the histogram here. Well, it's going to be way too small, but you want to sort of bring the histogram all together so that it can be viewed in one image. That's the whole purpose of tone mapping. Sorry, that histogram's too small to make any help. Contrast optimizer is a good way to get really natural results easily. But one of my favorite things, and I use for especially like interior work, I use exposure fusion, because then the natural results are really easy in case you're just getting started, for example.
Yeah, it looks much more like a single image photograph.
Yeah, but it's still brought in the sky, and it's still brought in the clock area, and I like.
But it didn't leave us with that shadow over the towers in the background that looks abnormal, and that's cool.
Yeah. So there's some options there. Yeah, that one. That's kind of, I would consider this to be halo-y right now.
Right.
We can work on that with smooth highlights is a good place to work if there's a halo issue. Halos should not be an issue anymore. I mean, they can happen, but they're very, very fixable. They shouldn't be there.
Now, when I think of halo, I'm thinking of like an outline around an object in a high contrast area.
Yeah, but it can happen the other way around too. You can you can see that kind of let me turn this back down. See how it becomes kind of a little bit. I would say those towers are too dark. They don't quite look Right.
Right.
It's kind of a. I think it's a similar phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
But from here, so we play around. We can play with the presets to see what's possible. There's a lot of alternative options. There's a crazy one. Very natural.
Yeah.
Maybe
See,
boring.
that's HDR for fun. Why not have fun with it?
Well, it depends on where it's going, right? So
Exactly.
if
Why not turn it into a Harry Potter castle right there?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to touch on really quickly. Let's go back to the results that I liked. Whoops, that's not it.
Pepper, for someone getting started with Photomatix, do you think it would be easier to get started using the exposure fusion options than the tone mapping options?
Often I think that's definitely the case. One thing that's important to know is it always depends on the scene, and so the results are going to vary just based because the things like tone mapping with details enhancer, it looks at the particular details of the scene that you've captured. So one set of settings is never going to be correct for every bracketed set that you shoot. Mm-hmm. So it does take a lot of working on individual images, where exposure fusion has that much less. So you can apply roughly the same settings to many. In fact, there are not even that many settings in comparison. Look on the left there. Yeah. There's just not as many options. So it's a much simpler way to go, and it can be again, if you're looking for natural results, that's one of my biggest tips usually is to say, don't forget about exposure fusion. Check it out. We've already had a couple questions about natural results and things, and that's one of my favorites to point out.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Ron.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Ron, speak if you would to the limitations of exposure fusion. What types of files can you exposure fuse? I know that as far as I can tell, it can only be done with a raw file. Is that correct? I mean, maybe I'm thinking for just single image exposure fusion, that can only be used with a raw file. A TIFF image or a JPEG won't work. Right? That's
correct. Yes. But, exposure fusion is. I can back up. It's a good idea. With tone mapping, there's this kind of background process going on where it creates a 32-bit file, which is not an image. It's just a bunch of data that mostly contains lighting information along with all of the color information. So the tone mapping is a process of taking that 32-bit file and making it into a photo, where exposure fusion is much, much more like layering your bracketed photos in Photoshop and layer masking or just erasing out parts and maintaining parts. It's very much a similar process. You're just greatly assisted by Photomatix Pro doing it, so that it doesn't take all of that painstaking painting and drawing. And so if you think of it that way, it's easier to kind of understand why you have to have bracketed photos. You can't do that. You can't layer one image on itself. You could change the exposure in RAW or whatever, but that's not really expanding the dynamic range in a real way. So it needs those bracketed source images. I think it was version 5 created the option to do what I mentioned quickly there, was to take a RAW file, and in essence what it's doing is pulling different exposures from the one RAW file. So if you load a RAW file, you'll see a checkbox in the first dialog that says Enable Exposure Fusion, so you can do that. Phew, long answer.
Yeah, cool.
Just from here, let me just go on from here. I've got a kind of I would say a very realistic result here. Simple, not and I'm just going to hit save and re-import. I just want to complete the circle here, and it's going to re-import it back into Lightroom. So now we're back in.
Automatically, we didn't have to do add or anything.
And now this is a 16-bit TIFF file? Is that what it comes back as?
It's what you chose. Yeah, I'm sure I chose 16-bit TIFF. You can choose 8-bit or JPEG if you want, but why?
Yeah.
So then, and from here, now we're in this familiar place where we can do any of the post-processing that we want. Clarity, and if you miss some of the shadows and bring a little bit back, that's kind of you can really combine the strengths of both, and so that's how one of my favorite ways to use HDR. Yeah, right there.
Very cool. So one of the questions that came in, I was asking was, what format do you recommend being saved in? TIFF, JPEG, 16, 8-bit?
This is another one of those where the answer is really how would you normally do your workflow. I try to keep when I'm editing fairly heavily, I'll try to work in 16-bit TIFF all the way, and the JPEG is usually just for the delivery version, but it follows the same kinds of rules. So if you start with raw files in this workflow that we're doing, when I hit export, the first thing that happened was the Photomatix plugin called on Lightroom to convert the raw to TIFF, and then combined those TIFFs, and then got rid of those TIFFs, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so then our processed result, because I had chosen that when I exported, is a 16-bit TIFF as well, but it doesn't have to be. But if you're gonna continue editing, which I usually intend to, then I would do that 8-bit TIFF if you're not going to do much editing on it.
Right. Cool. Makes sense.
All my opinion.
No, but that seems very reasonable. I mean, it's kind of like if you want to do, if you have the data and you want to edit it, you might as well keep it. Otherwise, you don't need it.
Right.
And kind of don't, and a lot of times it's don't overthink. You know, just do what you normally would do. You kind of you're adding a step or a tool into workflow, and but continue doing generally what you do, just with this addition.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right. Hey, look,
well, Mark,
we're coming to the top of the hour.
We are. It is almost time to wrap this thing up. It's actually time to wrap this up, but we've got one more demonstration for Mark for you.
Yeah.
And
so I was just saying, get your questions in too.
Exactly.
No problem, guys. Yeah, let me jump in and share my screen.
We want to include you in the raffle. We want to include you guys in the raffle, so please ask a question or just say hello in the Q&A section on the Hangout. And Mark, show us how to work this magic on a single image and get some, have some fun with it.
Awesome, man. Let me see if I can get my screen shared here, and we'll do just that. Let's see. There we go. Can you see me?
Be sure to choose entire screen.
Do you guys have me?
Yes. Do you have your sidebars open? Yeah, we have you. Do you have your sidebars open on Lightroom?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Is your grid filling the entire screen? Okay.
Yes, they're closed off. I have them fly out.
Okay, great.
Flyouts. Okay.
Which is working.
I have a variety. Thank you. I have a variety of shots here selected. Ron covered very well the landscape scene. As you can see, that you can create really realistic, really colorful, and in some situations oversaturated. These are raw Photomatix landscape ones here that we see, but I'll skip those for right now. Another good application for bringing in Photomatix Pro is with a single image. It can be anything. Just I don't even know where to start. I love the effects of HDR on metal, like say with this motorcycle or on this old
Let's see it on some metal.
Okay. Well, let me just show you this one really quick here. This will be a really quick one. In terms of pre-processing for any image, for the most part, let's jump over to the develop module. To reiterate what Ron was saying, it's really a no-no to mess with the tone curve at all, if at all possible. But it is a good idea to go ahead and apply lens corrections for the lens that was used. In this case, it was a Sigma lens, and it's not picking it up. But I'm just gonna bypass it because it's not really tweaked or anything. So I'm just gonna leave it like it is. But lens corrections and you can go in and remove some chromatic aberrations as well in here, which I know there's a little bit of purple aberration around the BMW logo. So I'm going to go ahead and remove some of that here. Maybe drop the blue down a hair. That's all for lens corrections. I might come in and under the details tab and apply some luminance, just a small amount of luminance and color noise reduction, and I'll crank up the detail a little bit just to preserve some details in that shot. Occasionally, depending on the shot, I will choose to hold down the Alt key and mask in a little bit of sharpness on the edges as well, just for kicks. We'll go ahead and do that. And okay, and from here, I'll just go back to the module and right-click and export this into Photomatix Pro. And we'll work in a 16-bit. Again, to reiterate what Ron was saying, I like to keep the file as I'm working on it as large as I can to maintain as much quality as possible across the image, and that is a typical pre-process for any shot. My preferred workflow is to work from a bridge HDR to Photoshop proper workflow. That's just what I'm accustomed to. Lightroom again, to reiterate Ron, it is the best of both worlds to be able to bring it back and forth. But I almost always go into a layered workflow that is masking out detail or masking in detail where I might want it. Which ties into the luminosity mask question that was asked earlier. You might want to mask in certain things. And you see here, this is the photographic. If you're looking for a realistic shot as far as photorealism, the photographic preset is a great place to start.
Hang on, Mark. We don't see that window.
Oh, you don't?
We still see Lightroom. Did you share your entire screen, or did you share the Lightroom window?
That is a good question, Levi.
So stop screen sharing and share again and choose entire screen, please. And then we'll get the whole kit and caboodle.
Oh, choose full screen? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. My apologies.
No trouble. Thank you.
Do you have it?
Perfect. Yep. There we go.
Okay. So we have a very tight poppy. A question was asked earlier how to get a realistic natural pop for your photographs. If you really want to do that and get it as close to realistic as possible, I highly recommend starting with the photographic preset within Photomatix and working from there. Drag the sliders to accommodate. In my opinion, this would be almost a completed shot. I used to be enamored with every slider in Photomatix Pro and would spend so much time just playing and seeing where it can go. But you know, as you get comfortable with the software, you really start to dial in the look that you're looking for. And to give you a contrast to this particular shot, say go over to the vibrant option, and this is going to basically apply a tone curve to every single line in the shot, and it's not necessarily an appealing look, but just to give you a contrast between the two to see the options for directions that you have to go. Default is a little bit more of a subdued, a little bit more of a subtle application. A lot of times I'll start with a default preset and work from there, you know, as opposed to a painterly where you can start to bring in the haloed effect. Again, in some photographs, that effect actually works pretty well, but you have to know how to dial it back, such as with the strength slider up at the top. You can dial it back and work it together with the contrast and turn the lighting effects off and back them off all the way. And you can, or not. You never know. Sometimes you just have to play with it and see.
Yeah.
Whatever removes the halos, you know, usually those three sliders, if I'm working in a surrealistic effect or if I want to bring in detail on something. And again, I try not to do that across a whole entire image. I'll see it in a place that I like it, and I'll go ahead and save out a copy, a 16-bit copy, and redo the process again under another name and mask in and bring all that together in a layered workflow within Photoshop to mask in the look that I'm looking for. But all in all, to answer that question earlier, if you're looking for a really poppy natural effect, either the natural effect or in this case the photographic effect, to me looked really tight, and it usually is a good place to start if you want to get into something like that. And so, you know, we would save and re-import that back into the library if we wanted to. I'm just going to go ahead and exit out of it for right now, and for expediency's sake, and go back over to Lightroom. Well, then, it didn't like me doing that, but that's okay. Can you guys see me in Lightroom here again?
Yes.
Okay, just one quick tip. Recently, I put up a post on PhotoFocus on scanning and digitizing your own film shots from days gone by. If you have a lot of film memories laying around that you want to scan, this is one of those shots from 1959, Holland, that you can see down here. Well, let's bring it up. It has a lot of work. This is where working together with this particular shot. I processed this shot in Photomatix Pro to bring the color that was lost in this image back out again in the original shot, and it turned out very nicely. This is obviously very heavy in the purple spectrum, which is fairly typical for Kodachrome film. Fuji Chrome film, on the other hand, will kind of, in my experience thus far, lean towards a greenish side. Yeah, and but Kodachrome really goes heavy into the purple spectrum. And if you wanted to mitigate some of these things up front, and I'll try not to take a lot of time with this, but just to show you, we would go into the HSL grayscale tab. Actually, the first thing we would want to do is to, where's the white balance tool here? I'm so used to
it's on the basic tab.
Gotcha. Yes. The white balance tool.
You usually work in Camera Raw, so
yes.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. You can see with just one click. I know this wall is gray just from experience in working with this image. You'd have to play around and find a neutral tone somewhere in the photograph and use that white balance tool to get things shifted in the right direction very quickly within one click. And then from there, we would go into the HSL grayscale tab and drop back, move the purples towards the blue side of things if we so choose, and maybe even come in and desaturate those purples a little bit more. And again, it's starting to look like a 1959 photograph now. There's still some purple in there,
right?
But for our example's sake here, just taking that photograph, and I have another one here actually. Let's use this one. I went in and ahead of time and took out a lot of the little hairs and debris that had gotten into the slide over years. And let's go ahead and export this one out very quickly, just for fun. And again, this is just for fun, right? So let's do this and take a quick look at it. Again, I'm going to work in a 16-bit TIFF file. And these little slides in the jumble, actually, you have the ability to work it in either 14 or 16 or 22 megapixel files, so you can really bring some size to these things and some detail to them. So just starting with a default look, you're starting. I like the way the bottom part of the image is looking. The sky went a little dark. I would bring it into Photoshop and mask in a little luminosity to bring depth back into the sky again manually. And to remove all of the little things here in the sky, we just use the spot removal tool. Actually, I use the healing brush tool in Photoshop, which is so much easier to use in some cases than the actual spot removal tool within the ACR interface or in Lightroom's interface, as Terry White was very apt to point out in the last Hangout session that you guys had. And it really is up to you. You're the artistic director in these things, and it's your call, however you want to do it. But the spot healing tool over in Photoshop is so much easier to use, in my opinion, and more intuitive in the way it computes and fills in gaps. So just wanted to get you a general direction to show you that you have many options at this point. You can go however you want. You can go in any direction that you want to go with these things as far as bringing in color and detail. And again, work with your strength sliders. And again, I'm looking primarily at the lower section of this image, not the top. And but 9 times out of 10, default is where I'm going to start because I like the way it popped the wood tones in these old boats, and any other color anomaly I have to work with, I'm going to work with manually over in Photoshop and mask it down and out, or use gradient masks and things like this. And you can even do that within Photoshop. And I don't want to overload the show with those types of minutia, but I did want to make the viewer aware that there are tons of options that you have as far as flexibility and creativity, and frankly, within a click or two, Photomatix is going to really help to get our colors to where we need them as far as bringing vibrance back into the scene again. And so I'll leave it off with that, you guys.
Cool.
Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks, Mark.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome. Did it again.
Didn't like
Great unusual use case. That's awesome.
So.
Thank you.
How did the hour fly by?
Yeah, really.
Man,
Quick, guys.
there it goes again.
Enjoyed it. Great questions.
Excellent questions. Excellent tips. I want to send a big thank you out to our sponsors while Levi is tabulating the final winners here. He always gets that very important job. So big thanks to Adobe for sponsoring this show and for donating a prize that we're about to give away. Big thanks to HDR Soft for having Pepper join us, but more importantly for the prizes they're giving away and sponsoring this Hangout. We really appreciate that. Big thanks to both Ron and Mark for joining us as well today and sharing all your tips. Levi, do you have a winner or two?
I do. I have a winner for the Creative Cloud Photographers Bundle. and that goes to Sandeep Dataraju. Is that about right, Sandeep? If you are still on, please leave another comment and tell us you're still here.
Yeah, so you got to be here to win it, to claim it. You had to suffer through all of this to get to the good part here.
Sandeep had a good question that we could do 15 on. So come to the next one, Sandeep, and ask about the bright areas should stay bright and stuff like that. That's a good question. But we can talk about it all day, so I don't want us to do it now.
Right.
So the short answer
is
yeah.
Good suggestion.
The short answer is yes. So yeah, so
and
if
then,
you...
I'll go ahead then.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just saying, if you're here, let us know you're here.
Tell us you're still here. And the HDR Soft license goes to Eck Lundberg.
Excellent.
Are you still here, Eck?
Eck.
EC?
Does that stand for something?
EC Lundberg? Yes.
EC?
I don't know. The extra cool Lundberg guy. If you're still here, please weigh in and give us something. And then, if you've got the means to get yourself to Yosemite for an incredible photo workshop with Rob Sylvan,
just go on over to thedigitalphotoworkshops.com and just sign up for our newsletter. And as soon as we're done with here, I'm going to go in there and pick a winner and email you directly.
Is that all you want to do, or do you want to pick one more from here?
Well, I only want people.
You have to be eligible. You have to be able.
Yeah, I don't want to give it to someone who unfortunately can't make it for whatever reason. So if you think you can go, I want you to kind of self-select and go and let it be known to me.
Right.
EC is here.
Eck's here. Do we have Sandeep?
No, I have not seen Sandeep. Sandeep, join in.
Sandeep, you got 12 seconds.
And we're also, Ron had a Photomatix Essentials also to give away.
Yeah, we can do that. I didn't even show what that is, but it's a bit simpler application. It's intended for people that are new to HDR, so it's a really great way to kind of get started. And yeah, we can give one of those away.
EC stands for Elizabeth. She chimed in.
Elizabeth. Thank you.
Doesn't like being called Eck.
Gotcha.
Understand.
Well, then write something else in there. Just please be understanding. We working with what we got here. All right, Sandeep, I'm moving on. So Sam Crump picks up the Adobe.
All right, Sam.
Creative Cloud.
Sam, if you're here, let us know you're here. And so, Pepper, tell us a little about Elements while waiting. I mean, Essentials. Sorry. About Essentials. While we're waiting for Sam.
I try to tell people sometimes that Photomatix Essentials works as a plugin in Photoshop Elements, and it's just so yeah, it's going to be easier to get started with it. First of all, if you have a license for Photomatix Pro, then you can use Essentials if you want to. It works together, but you don't need to. And we can give away an Essentials license. I don't know if we have time for a demo. We're going so far over. I think people need to get back to work, but
probably we could find something online about that one.
I bet there's a ton of great resources over on HDR Soft's website. So
yeah, the main thing.
And I've just drawn the name for that one. That's for Jude Baker, if Jude is still here.
Main thing is get it is starting with it. So there's information in there about bracketing and information about how to use it and what it means. So it's built that way already.
All right.
And anybody, by the way, can go to hdrsoft.com, click on the download, and download whatever you want. It all has that. There's no 30-day trial or anything. It doesn't ever expire. It just has the watermarking of the processed image type of a trial. So you can try it all you want for as long as you want.
Just get ready, because anybody that I send there for a free download ends up buying it. So just so you know, be warned.
No pressure. Low pressure sales.
Levi, Sandeep did say that he's here.
Sandeep said he's here. Well,
but Sam has not. So
Sam did as well.
Sam you did. All right.
Yeah. So Sam did as well. What else have we got? Has Jude weighed in? Has Jude weighed back in?
Jude only asked earlier. Oh, she said she is still here, and she has a license for Essentials already.
Still here.
However.
Oh well, thank you then, Jude. If you don't mind sending that, we'll send that over to Sandeep then.
Excellent. So Sandeep gets the essentials, and
So-
Sam gets the Photomatix Pro.
Sam's got the CC.
Oh, Sam gets the CC.
Elizabeth Lindbergh's got the Photomatix Pro.
Okay, you're
And
recording
Photomatix
on this.
Essentials goes to Sandeep. So, Ron, Pepper, can I send people your way to oh, and Jude is actually a guy. Thanks, Jude.
So if the winners of the Photomatix licenses, since I don't have your emails here or anything, I'm just seeing you here on the Hangout. Easy email support@hdrsoft.com. Just say, hey, I just won a license on the Hangout. I'll take care of you.
So that's for Elizabeth and Sandeep. Support.
Somebody said one, they didn't, because I'm here.
Yeah, not everybody who was watching gets that.
Yeah, we're on the honor system here, folks. And then
Jude,
Sam, can Sam contact you, Rob Sylvan?
yes, Sam, who won the Adobe one. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Just email me at rob@photofocus.com so that I have your email and contact information, and I will pass that on to Adobe. It does take a little while. Jack Larson, our previous winner, is here to tell you it takes a little while, but it does come through. So send me your information, and we'll take care of you. All of these Hangouts are recorded and available on photofocus.com. So if you came in late or left early, they're all here. All of our past ones, we've been doing this over a year now. There's a ton of them. There's also on photofocus.com a Learn HDR little menu button there, and there's a whole bunch of resources there. There's one for Lightroom as well, Learn Lightroom, and you can see all of our past Hangouts are right there, easy to find. And there's a ton of other content on PhotoFocus on both Lightroom, HDR, and tomorrow there's another Hangout that we're not in,
man.
at least I'm not in.
Tomorrow's a great one. Yeah.
On making great panos. So if you're into panoramics, tune in tomorrow. Go to photofocus.com and you can see all the details there. I know it's tomorrow, but if you look there, then it'll show you your local time wherever you happen to be in the world. So, whew.
I was trying to find.
Thanks, Rob.
I was trying to find a pano in this whole list of travel things to entice people. 1 second.
Elizabeth.
Because I took oh, here we go. It's not like I have to be anywhere.
And this is recorded, folks, for later viewing.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Sam, contact Rob Sylvan.
Sam,
And
you
Rob,
go to me.
What was your email again, Rob?
Rob
at
at
Photofocus?
Yeah, Rob at photofocus.com. For
for
the two other winners,
Sandeep.
go to support at
hdrsoft.com.
HDRsoft. All right.
So I just screen shared a handheld panorama from like one of the great lookouts in Prague, just because.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Nice.
I wanted to do something because there was not, whether or not cooperating, I wanted to do something that was unusual, so I did a handheld panorama, just held it up above my head and rotated it.
Wow, that's
Awesome.
good.
Nice.
Awesome.
So,
Well, yeah, go ahead, Rob.
I was just say, Pepper, where can we find more about you, what you do, and what you're up to?
My own photography site is called Panorama Network, but you can also just Google Ron Pepper, and I usually come up with a lot of photo-related things, and we'll get you there. At Ron Pepper in most places, including Twitter.
And Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Where can we find you? Oh, that's me, not Mark.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. And you can reach me at markmorrowphotography.com or Morrow Photoblog, or just over at photofocus.com. And you can reach me at mark@photofocus.com and Mark S. Morrow on Twitter and Instagram. So, yeah, thank you again, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you. And Rob, where are you?
Well, photofocus.com. You can find some of my Lightroom and other articles there. If you want to come take a trip, digitalphotoworkshops.com. And everywhere else, I'm all over the place. So.
Yeah. That's excellent. And
How
I'm
about
with my
you,
Sim. I'm on photofocus.com, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter at PhotoLevi. And we sure appreciate you guys joining us today, and we're very grateful to HDR Soft and Adobe for helping us help you with HDR. We'll catch you guys next time on the PhotoFocus Lightroom Hangout.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Ciao.